Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into two of the most powerful concepts in trading, margin and leverage. If you get these right, you can seriously amplify your trading. But if you get them wrong, well, that's exactly what we're here to break down.
So let's just start with the big question, right? This gets right to the heart of why traders are so fascinated by this stuff. I mean, it sounds almost like a magic trick, doesn't it? But it's actually a core part of how modern trading works. So let's pull back the curtain and see exactly how it's done.
All right, here's the plan. We're going to start with the big idea behind leverage. Then we'll properly introduce margin and leverage. We'll look at how they're connected, walk through a real-world example, clear up a really common point of confusion, and then wrap up with a super important word of caution.
Okay, so the answer to that $100,000 question, it really all comes down to this one powerful idea. The entire goal is to use a small amount of your own money to control a much, much larger position in the market. And this right here, this is the absolute key. You have to understand this relationship. Margin and leverage aren't really two separate things. One is literally the key that unlocks the other. So think of it this way. Margin is what you put up, and leverage is the power you get in return. To really get a handle on this, we've got to be super clear about what these words actually mean. So let's define each of these tools by itself before we see how they dance together. First up, leverage. The simplest way to think about it is as a financial multiplier. So if you see a 50-to-1 leverage ratio, that means for every $1 of your own money, you get to control $50 in the market. That's a huge boost to your trading power. So where does all that power come from? Well, it comes from margin. And margin isn't some kind of fee you pay. No, it's your own money that your broker sets aside as collateral, kind of like a good faith deposit. It's what allows you to open a position that's way bigger than the deposit itself.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. These two things are mathematically tied together. They have this perfect inverse relationship. As one goes up, the other has to come down. It's like a financial seesaw. And believe it or not, this whole thing is driven by this one super simple formula. The amount of leverage you get isn't just some random number your broker picks. It's a direct result of the margin they require you to post. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say your broker requires you to put down just 2% of the total trade value as your margin. You just plug that into our little formula. 1 divided by 0.02 equals 50. And boom, that means you get 50-to-1 leverage. Simple as that. This table just lays it all out perfectly, right? Check out what happens. As the margin requirement, that's the deposit you have to make, goes up from 2% to 5%, look what happens to your leverage. Your trading power drops from 50-to-1 all the way down to 20-to-1. See? An inverse relationship.
All right, enough with the theory. Let's get practical and see how this all comes together in an actual trading scenario. We'll use some nice, clean numbers to make it easy.
So imagine your goal is to trade a position with what's called a notional value of $10,000. Now, notional value is just a fancy term for the total size of the trade you want to control. Without leverage, you'd need the full 10 grand in your account. But as you know, we're not going to need that. So if your broker has that 2% margin requirement we've been talking about, the one that gives you 50-to-1 leverage, the actual cash you need to put up, your required margin, is just $200. And this image just drives the point home perfectly. You've got your small pile of cash, that's the $200 required margin, sitting on a lever, and it's allowing you to control that much, much larger $10,000 position. That is the power of leverage right there in a picture. Okay, now this is a really important point that trips up a lot of traders. The word margin gets thrown around in different financial markets, but what it means can change dramatically depending on if you're talking about Forex or you're talking about stocks. So let's be crystal clear on this. In the Forex world, like we've been talking about, margin is your own cash that you put up as collateral. It is not borrowed money. But when you hear about buying on margin with stocks, you are literally taking out a loan from your broker to buy those shares. So one is a deposit, the other is debt. That is a critical, critical difference. So what's the bottom line here? Look, leverage is an unbelievably powerful tool, especially if you're a trader with a smaller account. But that power is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. The legendary trader Jack Schwager just nails the psychological risk perfectly here. The tool itself is neutral, but the temptation it creates, that temptation to be impatient, to jump into a trade you have no business being in, it's huge. And the market just does not reward impatience.
And that leads us to the single most important takeaway. Just as leverage can magnify your winning trades, it will magnify your losing trades just as quickly and just as brutally. Which leaves us with the one question that every single trader has to answer for themselves before they even think about using this tool. Are you prepared for that responsibility?